how's everything going with the Kickstarter and your week so far? I mean, it's got to be pretty busy.
Hectic, yeah, hectic. It's going really well. It's going really well. I think a lot of people like to point at the big immediate successes, fully funded in 24 hours, and all that
Hmm.
sort of thing. But we didn't get that, but we are ahead of the game. So we're really pleased with how it's trending, and I think a lot of people tell you to expect a big spike and then just a really quiet period and then a big spike at the end. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's quieting down, don't get me wrong, but also not as much as we thought. We're still getting, we're still making moves. We're still hitting goals. I think we're at 30% and we were only at 25% like 2 days ago. So
Yeah.
pretty happy. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So is this your first Kickstarter you've been a part of?
Uh, yes and no. How is that an answer? So right back in the day, I was doing some client work with a mobile publisher. So I mean, we're talking 2000 and oh my god, 12 or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And so back then, people weren't that aware of like what worked and what didn't on Kickstarter, and we ran a very small one as a test for essentially like a free to play mobile game word puzzle game. So it's like all the things that just that don't work on Kickstarter. So there is that.
Yeah.
And I did an Indiegogo like a couple of years before that
Okay.
didn't go brilliantly. Again, small days, like small indie dev, but it was another mobile game, so
Yeah.
that was one of those things. But they work fine because you just get whatever's given to you, right? Whereas Kickstarter, it's all about hitting that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, my experience with it has been like you just said, where you get that spike and then it kind of eventually in the middle it would level out a bit. Always led to a lot of anxiety in the feeling of like I need to be doing more. Like with every minute of the day, it's like I need to be doing more, all the way through every single day of it. Um, at least with the
Yes.
ones that I've done three or four
Oh, amazing!
in the
Awesome.
in
I
the
should be asking
past.
you for tips.
No, it's it's one of those things where like I will say, at least as of late, one of the better things that I've seen with Kickstarter is grinding, just grinding it out. And what I mean by that is from a social media side of things,
Hmm.
because like when you start out, you get your initial burst of traffic. You're going to get it internally from Kickstarter. You're going to get it externally from your first announcement that it exists, And then
Yeah.
if you had your pre-campaign up and people are getting notified, and so you're getting that initial burst
Yeah.
of traffic.
Yeah.
Um, but then after that initial burst, it's like just like anything else within video games. Now it's just a fight for attention. Before you can even like a lot of people, they think about positioning and what's the hook for the game and how to communicate those things to convert and increase their conversion rate. Before you even get to that, at the very core of it is just attention. You need people to know that you exist before you even think about the other things. Um, and that's kind of where you're at. Everyone's there, and so, but with Kickstarter especially. So what I've seen that definitely helps, especially in that middle area where it kind of levels off. It's because the momentum you had it, and now it goes kind of levels out until it gets near the end, and then it comes down to a little bit of FOMO kicking in and so on, and then and actually getting momentum, pledge wise. But in the middle, it's just all about attention. And so you can brute force it in a way. So from a PR side of things,
Yeah.
you can send out your press release, you can try to get media involved, but it's not entirely in your control. If you send out that press release, you can have great assets, you can have a great press release, you can word it really well. You can send it out to very targeted individuals that you've done research and you think they'll like it. But at the end of the day, when you send that email off or that whatever way of communicating with them, once that goes out, it's up to them to figure out if they can fit it within their schedule and actually, produce content for you. Same thing with content creators and influencers. If you have a demo, which you do, which is
Yeah.
great, you can send it off to them. You can do that research to find, those that have played games or experiences similar to what you're producing and think, all right, well, if they like that, I think they'll like our game.
Mm.
That's great. Those are always things you need to do. But again, when you send that email off, it could fall through the cracks. They could be uber busy. It's December. We're getting the holidays. So
True.
that's not guaranteed. That's out of your control too. But what is in your control is social media, and you can brute force it. So like, what I like to do is, and this isn't even just for Kickstarter campaigns. It's just kind of in general on a day-to-day basis. Is just four to five, especially during Kickstarter campaign, 4 to 5 unique social media posts per day per major channel. So you want to do Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok. And if you do 4 to 5 a day, it doesn't matter if people, see the same post or they see it doesn't matter. And it's more about quantity than quality. Quantity will lead to quality. But if you're too focused on the quality side of things, you're missing so much visibility and attention.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what I like to do is 4 to 5 and then just repost. So it sounds like, a ton of content, but in reality, it's 4 to 5 unique posts that just get reposted. So you'll have a story or you'll have a reel on Instagram and YouTube. That's the same post that's on TikTok. Or you'll have your short on YouTube, reel on Instagram, reel or short on Facebook. All these different terms, but meaning under a minute. You'd make a TikTok and then repost, so that one post goes on all the channels. And if you do that every day, you're just brute forcing attention. And then every once in a while, especially on TikTok, because every individual piece of content is viewed in isolation, they all have an opportunity to burst and get a ton of visibility. It's not guaranteed, but it's always possible. And so if you're trying it 4 to 5 times a day, especially during a Kickstarter campaign, you're going to give yourself the attention that you need. And that can help during that middle kind of stagnant point, and I found in the past that's been the most cost efficient way for a lot of indie studios specifically. Because at that point it's just time. It's just a little bit of time to
exactly.
to
It's all
done.
about the time, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's the thing. We're a small team, and we're sort of coming down from the launch, and like we've still got there's a few sort of bigger bang for buck like efforts that we can do, around like individual streamers, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're sort of settling into that period of like, okay, well, we're just gonna have to keep talking about it, and that's exactly it's exactly it. And it buckle up. And there's a very, I don't know if it's just like English. I'm sure there's other places around the world that are like this, but like culturally, it feels weird to kind of like say the same thing over and over and essentially ask for money and all this kind of thing. But like, you got to remember, nobody's going to see that more than once. You're lucky if someone sees it once at all, right?
Exactly.
So, like, it doesn't matter if you do the same thing. It's
100%.
Yeah.
So there's that. That was a great point. And then there's also, when you use these platforms. Wait, I totally lost my train of thought there. You made a great point in that you're not going to see it more times. You don't have to worry about people seeing it multiple times, which that it does make a ton of sense, specifically on like TikTok, because it's not about your followers. Each piece of content lives on its own. But yeah, no, that was a great point. I had another thing that like flowed right off that, and it died, and it's gone.
It'll come back.
Yeah, it will. But no, I did play your demo, by the way, before this. Before I got in here, it's oddly a really satisfying experience, even where it's at now. And I know you're very early, in the process. But with Trash Goblin, there was a lot of like power wash simulator vibes when using the sponge, which that internet, just the sponge itself was very satisfying going through the process of cleaning. So I really enjoyed that. I do enjoy the characters at the window. I think there's a lot to build off of with that too. Building up, connections and so on.
Yeah, big plans for that stuff, definitely.
I could see, it's one of those things where it doesn't matter how early you are with it. Like, you can see the potentials there at the root of what is available to play.
So good to hear.
There's a lot of cool things that could happen there. Because you have your time management wheel as well. And that introduces a whole new avenue of things you could do, it makes me think of Persona and how you have your time management throughout the day, and then you can start doing things with other characters. So like Persona at the heart of it is a JRPG, but you have all these relationships and different dialogue options and ways to spend your time that add this unique flavor on top of the main genre that it is, and make
Yeah.
it something really unique and special. And I think here you have a similar opportunity in being that comfy, just fun power wash, simulator vibes, from handling each, and then you have you could even introduce puzzle-esque ways of handling each object through the chipping away to reveal them. That's the way that it felt that it was going. It didn't get there, but it felt like this is kind of where it may go. But you've got a lot of things blending, and they're already starting to blend really well in the demo that's currently available. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. It was
It's lovely to hear that. Thank you so much. Like, you've hit on so many elements there that I think are like interesting to cover. But so very quickly, like just initially, one of the biggest stress points for us around this demo, we're like, we have to have a demo at some point during the Kickstarter, right? Like that's the thing that will seal the deal. We feel, because every time we've shown it at like EGX or pitching to publishers, that sort of thing, the response to the demo has been really, really strong. So we're like, okay, if we can build confidence internally that, like, not bulletproof, but that it's not going to fall over, right? Like, especially if we were to release it on Steam, that was a really big thing. It's like there's one thing behind the scenes to Kickstarter backers, right? But the wider Steam community is like, is it ready for that? And then secondly is, and this comes from a year of pitching it to publishers. Maybe we'll go on to the Reddit post at some point about that. But like, we understand very acutely the importance of presenting an incomplete thing in a way that, what's the word? Like, some elements feel more complete than they are. Some are clearly incomplete. Some kind of tease at features and functionality that we want to put in, but we're not sure about. And honestly, it's been fabulous, because I think what you're saying has been echoed a lot to us about how successful it is. People seem to be vibing with it in the way that we intended, right? And that's like the best outcome. Feature completeness or like this exact thing or that exact thing. It's more just people seem to be really going, oh, I can see where this is going, and that's the dream, right? Because let me tell you, it used to be a puzzle game.
Okay.
There was a time when it was straight up Picross 3D. That was the chipping mechanic.
Yep.
And it was a real, like, one of those moments in dev where you're like, okay, so people who like that and understand that really enjoyed it, and everyone else bounced off it really hard. Like, it was like chopping the audience not in half, because there was like 5% of people have played or understand what Picross is and therefore had fun. We're like, do we want to keep them and serve them, or do we want to break it open and be more appealing? So the idea of bringing more puzzle into that chipping mechanic, absolutely. But what we did first was remove it entirely, and then we'll sort of creep back. We'll creep back in little steps, and we'll find out where the balance is. But
that's really interesting.
Yeah,
it was already
always like, no way. Like,
yeah, that's really interesting. It's again, it's one of those things where, like you're blending, and it's now that you're adding clarity coming from the puzzle element and then branching out, which I think was a really good thing to do that. But one thing I wanted to mention was the theme and you mentioned vibe. I don't know if there's a better way to put it, but there's a specific vibe that's going on with this game, and the artistic style complements that vibe really well. And this is a different looking game, visually speaking, from a lot of the games that have come from Spilt Milk in the years past. So that was another thing I wanted to bring up. I mean, since we're already talking about, I thought we were going to talk about, initially the plan was to move the talk about Trash Goblin until later, but just kind of jumped right in, which is great. I had fun with it, but I did want to make a point to mention the game is called Trash Goblin. We hadn't specifically said that yet, but yes, the game is called Trash Goblin. It's currently on Kickstarter for those that are listening and watching. But yeah, and there is a free demo on Steam. I highly recommend checking it out. really, I love the visually, even the illustration, the main illustration that's shown of the goblin
Yeah.
tinkering about. Awesome. Just an outstanding illustration. It fits that kind of cozy vibe that's going on with the game. And then, having this owner, even when the initial dialogue where they're like, I hate when you call me boss. We're partners. And like, so you're setting this vibe. So the dialogue setting the vibe. Artistically, you've got a good vibe going on. And then just playing about with it. It all fits really well. It also gives me like Stardew Valley kind of easygoing kind of nature to it, which again leads me to kind of a wish list of some form of relationship building. I just think with this particular game, and the time management system you already have in place, I think that could lead to something to kind of complement everything else that's going on really well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like it's meant to be in a way with this game.
This is the thing, right? Like it's come together enough for this demo that, and I think the visuals, the tone, it's all super important. Again, to like we're trying to like hint at something that is going to be delivered.
Yeah.
And the closer we can get in terms of how people feel about it emotionally, the minutiae can change, right? The details can change, but like the emotional connection and like you say, there's certain features that people just kind of expect. It's like, even if it wasn't in the plan originally, and believe me, we've got a Miro board that is crashing some people's browsers because it's too big. That's like our design document, right? And so we've spent a lot of time planning on paper, but every time you implement something, it all changes, right? It like sends a shockwave through all of your plans, right? And then you have a demo on Steam and people playing it and coming back to you and going, I love this. I'm not so fond of that. You're like, bam, more shockwaves, more ripples going through your plans, right? And you can only react to it. And the more people come back to us and say, oh, I love the art, the vibe, like I just want to play more, the more confident we are in allowing those ripples, right, to affect our plans. And the more excited I get about it, because it'll only get better for it, right? So like you say, people are talking about the characters in a way that we'd hoped, but we didn't know they were going to be like, oh, I want to see more. Like, who is this? What do they do? What's a lizard person? Like, are there more lizard people? Like, why do they want a hairpin? They haven't got any hair. Like, all these little things that are, some are incidental, some aren't, but just getting that moment of like, right, okay, yeah, and we've got plans for like haggling and sort of getting to know your regular customers, and there's like a difference between like regulars and side quest NPCs, if you like, and then like the generic kind of the customers that just serve the function of you needing a shop that feels like it's doing good business, right? As a player, you want to be able to sell stuff most days. But yeah, like just seeing where that goes and seeing where people expect it. And I think the relationship building is one example. The haggling is like another one of like, if I as a player am interested in a game that sort of gives you this, what's the word, like aspirational situation of running a shop.
Yeah.
What is that without haggling, right? That's part of that fantasy, surely. And like we knew that, but we didn't want to put something in that was like half baked, because then that would almost take away from it, right? Like people would lose confidence at that point. We can say, given what you've seen and the quality to which we're trying to deliver it, hopefully you believe that when we put haggling in, it will work and it will be fun and exciting. But if we put in something that was like not quite that, then it becomes a different question, right? So yeah, that was a point of contention, and real, like, we really, really thought about what we were doing there with which features we put into the demo and how far we pushed them before we were happy for people to play it.
Yeah, and I think that, you mentioning all the feedback that you're getting, and where it sounds like a lot of it is hard line in the sand. I really like this. I really don't like this. I love that. And I look at that as an indicator of you're onto something good. Because if they didn't care and if they didn't enjoy it, one, you wouldn't get the feedback to begin with. And two, if they were kind of just mildly interested, they may give kind of wishy-washy feedback because they're not as invested, as interested. But when you get those hard, I don't like this, this should change to this, even if it's conflicting to what you want to do or what you're even going to do, it's still great to get that, because that's a great indicator that you're hitting something. You're doing something really well with it. So I think from where you've gone from being this isolated puzzle game and kind of expanding out now and pivoting, I think that the pivot you've made has been a good, like a positive pivot. And really the just again the drastic difference in visually and this type of game relative to what you've been working on, it seems like a lot of things are kind of doing really well here. And I did want to ask you about, because you've been around, you personally, you've been, in this industry for, I have it written down here, about 18 years, over 18 years now, I believe,
Yeah.
starting in 2005, which this is outstanding. But Spilt Milk Studios being around for a long time as well.
Yeah.
What ended up kind of bringing Trash Goblin to existence, and being this kind of unique, type of game relative to what you've been working on in the past, well over a decade, with his studio.
Yeah, giving a bit of context on that 10 years, essentially. So it was traditional stuff, traditional indie, sort of project to project, opportunity to opportunity, no real plan. And then it so happened that the year of the pandemic was our 10th birthday. And one of the least important things to happen was that our birthday party was cancelled because the pandemic was happening.
Yeah.
But around that time, we were like, okay, it's been 10 years. Like, what do we want to do for the next 10? What do we want to achieve? We've learned so much. We've got a really interesting team, lots of contacts, but what do we want to do? So we pivoted around this fantasy world that we wanted to build, this IP. And we're like, okay, what games can we build? How do we get that out there in a playable form? And that coincided with, as I said, the pandemic, and basically a few opportunities happened. So one was that we got paid to do some VR prototyping for a game called Chasmfall, that was based in this IP. Unfortunately, we didn't land a publisher for it, but it was really, really useful for us. Also, we managed to hire up a few juniors because of the UK government's work support scheme. I can't remember the official name of it, but essentially it meant that they would support us in hiring people remotely. And so we'd always been working remotely. We were perfectly set up to take advantage of this situation, that was affecting everybody across the world. And hopping back to sort of 2013, 14, I think it was, something like that, the UK Games Fund was founded. And it's a fund for games, for prototyping and for shipping games. And the project that we pitched and won then, it was a very small amount of money, but it helped us build a first-person prototype. And we didn't know then that was the first entrance into this IP. So people kept asking us about it. We even took it to GDC and pitched it to like Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo and that sort of thing. People kept asking us years later, you're like, how are you remembering this? They were like, where's that thing you did? Amazing. And so we're like, well, if we're going to pivot around anything, it'll be based off of that. And so that prototype combined with a sort of a broad sort of story idea and a world in my head and a few other things combined into this thing. Anyway, VR prototype, a bit more work for hire. And then we got to a position where, looking at the PC market and the team that we had, we decided, right, we want to ship a game like in less than 2 years with the team that we have. So it has to be tight scope. It has to be profitable. So it has to be of a genre that is popular or a subgenre that's popular. So we're making a lot of tactical decisions. And it's something that we're going to return to, but we were making we call it an action strategy game. It started off as a tower defense game. It sort of morphed into sort of a bit more of an RTS. And it was in this world that we built. So the idea was, okay, how can we cheaply introduce people to like as much of the world and the races and the characters and the story as possible? Where it's like, let's have a bird's eye view. What kind of games have bird's eye views? And then also, how do we de-scope? Okay, like strategy games are popular, but what if we do a riff on a tower defense game? It's strategy, but, so all of these things were combining. And then unfortunately it grew legs, as projects do. And so we were like, this is no longer something we can ship in the time that we want with the team that we want. We need it. It's just naturally, it deserves to be bigger than we were trying to keep it. At the same time, we'd been doing an awful lot of work with universities across the UK. So we would set student briefs and work with student teams to hold them to those briefs and deliver projects and publish them on itch. And one team did an amazing job of, maybe someone's guessed it already, a Picross 3D game, but combined with an archaeology kind of theming and setting. So literally this idea that I'd had in my brain for like a very, very long time of, oh, that's a perfect mash of like mechanic and theme, is archaeology, chipping away at something to reveal something valuable, and 3D Picross, right? It's so cool. Why has no one done it? So we got the student team to do it, and they knocked it out of the park. It was part of Anglia Ruskin, who are based out of Cambridge, and they did such a good job. It made us think. It's like, hang on, we could run with it. This works. This is really satisfying, and it works. So if we took they've proved something, but we're not going to take anything they've done, but we could transfer that idea into this world. And one of the key elements of this world was, or the way that we're trying to build it was making it feel authentic. And so almost the inverse of the bird's eye view, we were like, hang on, we could get really up close, and we don't have to build like 3D characters. If it's just objects in a room, what does that do to the scope of this game, and how could we make it interesting? And then it grew into a shopkeeping game, right, from this weird puzzle game. But all of these things were in reaction to opportunity still, but planned opportunity, right? Opportunity along a path that we had defined. And let me tell you, like, Eamon the shopkeeper and the shop itself upstairs that you may or may not get to see in the full game of Trash Goblin is a shop and a character that was in the VR game. So like, that piece of work it has lasted. And so all of these steps that we took, where we were like, let's try, and then finally we've kind of latched onto something with Trash Goblin. All of these steps worked, and some of the characters and the races from the tower defense game, they're in here, right? Like, and even down to, and I hope this isn't like too sort of like into the weeds, but the game before the tower defense game is called Sellswords. We had a playable demo. We've run beta tests on our Discord. One of the things was that in between levels of strategy, you'd be in your base camp in a first person view with 3D environments and 2D character art, going around talking to characters and getting to know them, right? Trying to cover both ends of the kind of the scale of this world.
Yeah.
And so Trash Goblin was very much if this works, it proves our pipeline and our art flow for doing that. It gives us a benchmark. So even that has influenced this game. And it's all of these disparate parts, but some of them are creative, some of them are business-led, some of them are just the reality. Who have we got? What can we make? What are we good at? And all of that added up to this game.
Yeah, I like your stress of scope. That's something that, on this podcast specifically, I've spoken with a handful of teams that, have spoken about scope in a good way and then not so good ways where it kind of did get out of hand. One of them in particular, I don't know if you've heard of Moonstone Island. It recently released, I think it was a few months ago at this point, published by Raw Fury. Yes. And that team, when you kind of expand all the features within that game, it's like, and no, how did you get a publisher to approve this? Because the scope, just trying to explain the scope of this, most publishers would be like, there's no way you're going to complete it. And they did it, and I can't remember how long it was, but it was, it might have been 2 years, 3. It was something compact. And the scope of the game, it's very similar to Stardew Valley in a way, but even more so. And it's just like, this is insane, combining Pokemon with Stardew Valley and having all these different dialogue or relationship building and JRPG elements and, building, and it's insane. But they did it.
Oh my God, I'm getting hives just thinking about it. Like, the producer in me is like, excuse me? Like,
when,
how many things? Like,
when Sandy Spink was explaining all this to me, I was at a loss for words of like, how did you do it? How did you not? Because that's the first thing I would think of. Even if it was my kind of idea for the game and expanding all these different thoughts for features, I would check myself and be like, nope, you can't do. You got to cross that off. You can't do that. You're adding way too much here. but he just embraced it and it was just like, nope, we're going full go. Let's do this. I mean, it was very impressive, and it worked out really well. I've been playing it on my Steam Deck, and it's a very very fun game.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's good to hear that you're not full go on the scope, and again, that definitely comes back to your experience and your years of experience in doing this. I mean, starting in QA and kind of working your way all the way up, to this point. Which, by the way, I did want to touch on, Spilt Milk being around. You said it's going on 14 years now. That in and of itself is a massive accomplishment for an indie team.
Thank you.
So, and I think that's a great point to kind of expand on a little bit for any developers or someone that may want to get into independent development. Are there any points of knowledge or things that you could share that helped kind of keep you sustainable through all of this time, going through a pandemic, and kind of making it through 14 plus years and still kind of going away? That longevity. Is there any tips or anything, insights rather, that you could share over 14 years of experience?
How long have we got? I don't know. I think the first thing is I'll caveat. I think everybody's experience is different. The circumstances are what you have to react to, right? And so I'll try and give examples that we've done as concretely as I can, but it's like what was the approach we took rather than the specific thing we did, I suppose. That's probably the biggest piece of advice is be flexible and be aware of your limitations and your opportunities. I mean, I can trace every piece of work that we've ever been paid for to having met someone before that work happened. So the idea that I wish I was more strongly opposed to the sort of phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? I wish I was more strongly opposed to that. I do think that's not true, because it's both, right? Like, who you know will bring opportunities for you to use what you know to execute and take advantage of those opportunities, right? I think that's a more accurate sort of rephrasing of that. And so a super concrete example, when I was working at Proper Games on the XBLA game Flock and then Final Fight Double Impact, two people were really closely involved from Capcom US. So one of them was Adam Boyes, who went on to be on the stage with as Sony essentially at the PS4 announcement at E3, where they completely dominated. I'm still sort of weirdly proud of him for being there and doing that. We got along really well, and I maintained that contact after I left Proper Games. The relationship that we built started when I pitched Flock to him at, oh my gosh, it was Gamescom. I can't remember the year, but it was in Leipzig, so it wasn't in Cologne. So we're talking a long time ago. We didn't have an appointment. We didn't book anything, but there was an opportunity. We had some time that we had not got people booked to come to our stand and look at this game that we were trying to pitch. I was the designer, but not the design director on the project. I was there, and I decided this is an opportunity to go around the business area at Leipzig and just see who's around and just ask, what's the worst that can happen? Turned up to the Capcom booth, asked the lady at the front desk, is there anyone here from developer relations or product acquisition? And as it happened, the person who she pointed to was like, well, Adam's here. He just had someone cancel 5-10 minutes ago. He's probably got 10 minutes. So introduced, and he said, okay, I've only got 10 minutes. What have we got? And I was like, well, our booth is literally around this corner. Come with me. And he's like, right, let's go. And he said, is it any good, this game that you're about to show me? And I said, yeah, it's great. And he quoted that in multiple talks he's given as the way to pitch. Now, I was just being like a bolshy Englishman, desperate to impress, right? It wasn't a plan. But I learned that, right? And I've used that ever since. But the crucial thing is it's you could look at that situation we were in and say, oh no, we don't have any people booked in this period of time. That's a bad thing. And I'm not saying I was clever or anything like that, but it was, okay, it's been my mantra, is you can try and turn anything into an opportunity if you just look at it from a different angle, right? And that's probably the single biggest sort of piece of attitude advice I would give. Just whatever's happened, try to like have your emotional response to it. Be sad, be upset, be angry, whatever. But then try and get past it and just try and like look at it from a different angle, through a different lens. How can you turn it into something? And I'm not saying it's worked every time, but it's a useful tool to have. So from that moment, little did I know that would start a relationship that through 3 or 4 years, shipping 2 games with Capcom, and then going to start my own business, Spiltmilk Studios, did a bit of client work with him. So he was running, pitches for other companies, and he asked me to do some design consultation, and then that leads to like an invite to another show and this, that, and the other, and then eventually he introduced me to a friend of his who founded Iron Galaxy, who are a very.
I was going to say,
American
that's
studio.
what I was about to bring up. I've seen Adam and the guy who I don't know the name.
Is it
I
Dave
know who
Lang?
you're talking about. Yes.
Yes.
They look like they're related. They have similar vibes. Like they're yeah. So every time I've seen Adam, I've seen David.
Yeah.
So every time, which is very funny. But yeah. I was going to ask about Iron Galaxy.
Brothers from another mother. They are, and they're very dear to me. I haven't spoken to them in years, but
sure.
We ended up doing a little bit of work for Iron Galaxy at one point, like a little tiny little piece, and like you just never know, right? And off of the back of the pieces of work that we were doing around that time were all small enough that on the one hand, oh no, we haven't landed a big project and a load of funding, but we've got a lot of time to respond to opportunities. And when I tell you that the Games Fund thing that we applied for required like a written and video application, and we didn't have an idea to pitch, and then we did with a week left, and we got the funding. I'm not saying it was a great pitch. It might have been that everyone else was terrible. I don't really know. But the fact that we were able to go, we can spend a week just focusing on this and try and land it, and we did. That was it was a choice that we were able to make because we were just, I guess, cognizant of all of the elements going on in the business at the time. And then that led to us going to GDC to pitch to Nintendo and Sony, and our links with Sony at that time meant that, okay, hey, Adam, if we were going to be able to book someone, who would you recommend we get in touch with, rather than just being like dev@sony.com, hire you at GDC. Do you know what I mean? And then that demo had such a good response there that we're like, okay, we're just going to show this to everyone, and this will be my last piece of advice. Otherwise, I will just keep on going. You've got to be excited about what you're making, and you've got to show it to everyone all the time. And if you're not that excited, if you're finding you have to act excited, maybe you should. That's a sign, right? Go back and think about that and try and turn the game you're making into something that does excite you. But we were just booking everyone we'd ever met who was in games or adjacent. We're like, we'd love to come and show you this thing we've made because we think it's really cool and shows off our team skills. And that led directly to being invited to pitch. And then we landed a deal that would sadly result in a game that eventually got cancelled. It was the MMO Lazarus. But the funding that we got for that was more than we'd ever had in it. And it sat us through for 2-3 years of development, working with amazing people, building our capabilities as a team. And it's all, like I said, I could go on till now, but I can follow it through the people. But if we'd done a bad job, or if I'd stumbled, or if I'd wasn't excited about the game, it wouldn't have happened. The opportunity would have passed us by. So hopefully that's useful. I don't know, and it dives a little bit into our sort of background as a studio.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember going to GDC my first year, and like what you were bringing with time management, being at an event like that, and kind of looking, just utilizing every minute you have there, and to explore opportunities. I had a similar thing happen where at GDC, I can't remember which year it was, but I was running a guerrilla marketing campaign outside of the Moscone, where I had people dressed up in dapper tops, pajama pants, wearing werewolf masks, handing out VIP invitations on the corner. And so I have that team that I'm managing, and I meet with them in the morning at the Starbucks near the Moscone. I give them all of their wardrobe, and then we have a time to meet back at that Starbucks to collect the wardrobe, get info, how did it go, and so on.
Mm.
But then in between that, I'm still having to go funnel through meetings and try to, and use every minute that I had there. And that led to, obviously new business, but it was one of those things where I had a couple of meetings, cancel or not reply. And I get it, when you're there and you're in the thick of it, you can lose track of time. It happens. But then trying to pivot in real time and figure, okay, well, they're either 10 minutes later, they're not going to show up. What can I do right now? And go to the expo floor. Let's see what's going on there. Let's talk to some people. Let's look at games, see if anyone has any needs. Another thing personally I've found is always trying to provide value, and being a service provider, doing specifically marketing, I've found that from a business development side of things, just lightly kind of adding to what you were talking about. Um, but from a business development side of things, I've always found that instead of just like cold calling, sometimes you need it. From a business development standpoint, like we need to bring in business. It has to happen. But when you do just blatant cold calls and you're coming out with just sales right away, you're not providing value unless the person is at that stage where they need that help there, where they need that particular service. More so, what's better is if you're always looking to provide value before you're coming in with a sales pitch. And that can be anything from, providing education, educational pieces of content, things that can help, blog posts, podcasts, things that always, when from the absolute forefront of your brain being, how can I help? How can I provide value without expecting anything in return? That always helps. That's always helped, rather, from my side of things, along the way. Whether it's being at events and trying to provide value. So like when I would go to the expo floor and I'm speaking with developers, it's not just about like when I would speak to them, I would ask them, is there anything in terms of production or anything that you're finding that you need, that you're kind of lacking right now? Because I'm looking to meet people from all different areas of specialty. So if you need localization, or if you're looking for a publisher, or if you're looking for a particular thing, if I know somebody or people in those areas that I can always recommend, I'm always happy to do it. So instead of coming at it from a, hey, how's it going for marketing side of things? No, it's more so always look to provide value. And this may not be as applicable, or it'll be a little bit different from running a game studio, but from the side of things where you're looking for business development or various opportunities, if you're coming at it from a providing value perspective, first, I think that can help in terms of longevity as well. But yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying, and kind of maximizing that time and always looking for opportunities and moments, because it can happen, anywhere, anytime. But I do want to ask about, being a remote team, primarily remote. How has kind of relationship building, or not necessarily relationship building, but connecting with other individuals in the industry, how has that gone from the remote standpoint? I know at events it's easier because you're all there together, for business purposes, and it's easier to kind of link up and meet people. But when you're not there at events, which is the majority of time, you're working, whether in office or remote. Do you have anything from that standpoint? Because I think that'll add value to developers that are, maybe they're new, or they're not going to as many events, or they can't go to events. Is there anything there that you have experience with?
I guess the broad experience that we've had over the past 3 years, like very much everyone's in the same boat, right? Which is in terms of, like you say, opening up to people who maybe can't, for whatever reason, get to physical events. That's been great. We've met a lot of people that we wouldn't have otherwise. but I would say that the quality, if you like, of that connection has on average reduced, because you do miss a little element. Like the physical element is quite important in building relationships with people. You know, seeing how they're reacting and responding. Their body language is a big part of it, and so's like building memories with people. You know, so our memories of most of these interactions are the same across the last 2-3 years. It's this, right? It's on the screen, and like it can be fascinating and interesting and all that sort of thing, but it sort of molds into one in that sense. Nothing really stands out. I always like to look at what people have got in the background and be like, "Ooh, that's a cool poster." Which, by the way, that is a cool poster. It's a little. My feed's terrible, but it looks like maybe it's Okami or something.
Yeah, it's actually our dog,
Oh wow!
Mona. She's a Siberian Husky, and it was turned into Okami. My girlfriend
Oh,
made it. It was a Christmas gift one year.
that's so cool.
Yeah, that's Mona as
Oh
Okami.
wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Love it. Well, yeah. So there you go. So now I'm like, you're right. Yes, cool. So there's a little bit. I would say, like beforehand, before the pandemic, we mostly used. We were not as what's the word? It's the trendy sort of remote first. We weren't remote first. I would say we are now, but we also didn't really have a fixed office space or anything like that. We're lucky enough to share a games workspace actually now, which is amazing in London. But basically the big advantage was for us to be able to work with the people we wanted to more flexibly. You know, so a lot of the people that we work with on a freelance basis, even just across the UK, it's a small place, but transport's not great, and you'd be like, you know, the difference between being able to say, hey, this artist I love and admire, they could work with us because they don't have to come to the office. They can just do that. They can just sit at their desk and go for it. And I think it's been quite interesting because you attract a lot, like that opportunity is there, and that opens up a section of the workforce that's like set up and ready. A lot of freelancers do that anyway, right? And then you've got people again who are through, you know, disability or financial situation, whatever it is, that they can't do a normal office job, a quote unquote normal office job. So there's opportunities there. But on the flip side, specifically with the freelancers, it's like, oh, if you really want them to be like a crucial part of your team and the company going forwards, the difference between building a team for a game and a company for a, you know, a life, tempting them out of the freelance kind of lifestyle. That's difficult. That's a challenge. But yeah, I think we'd always been. We never really planned it. We just had to. So from the first project that we did, I think I was on a laptop in my dad's like work shed, you know, and so it's like, well, I don't have an office and I can't have meetings here, so we're going to have to do it virtually. So it was necessity rather than, you know, planning, and then you know, we sort of like leaned into it, and we broadly just try to run it as close to an office as we can within reason. So a bit of minutiae. We run everything through Discord. It's our platform of choice, basically because we can have dev server and the community server, and it's, you know, nice and easy to just like copy paste whatever, hop between the two. You know, video conferencing, we encourage people to have their videos on at all times, that sort of thing. We have 2 stand-ups a day, so it's a small meeting where we just catch up with each other. But it's because you don't get the general sort of buzz. You can't see what people are working on. It's not because I'm like, I hope you're doing your work. It's because I'm excited by it, you know. So we encourage that. We encourage people to share GIFs and pictures and progress, and that's interesting because some people, well, a lot of people are like, they're quite proud of what they're working on and they don't want to show it work in progress, and we have to like normalize that. So we kind of, the more the senior team do it, the more the junior team are comfortable to do it, you know, the more that sort of thing. This part ebbs and flows with our funding and our ability, but basically just like making a meaningful amount of effort around like social events, you know, even if it's just playing a bunch of Discord games together, you know, for an hour once a month or something, like just making sure those little moments happen. And generally, I guess we're quite careful about tracking and planning because it's difficult to, at the drop of a hat, you know, ask someone over the other side of the room, hey, how's that going? What's the ETA? So you need to be able to, like, I need to asynchronously to you know where you're at, um, uh, and that can be a challenge. But at the same time, we try and lean quite hard into like, look, it's supposed to be fun. This job, we have quite rigorous process, and that's the bit that we take seriously. But everything else is fun, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the balance that we try and strike, because otherwise, people aren't getting the information they need, right? If a producer's job is to help you ship on time and to quality, they need that information. And so we have to be quite like strict about that flow and that process. But to balance that bitter pill, we try and make everything else a little more interesting, a little more fun, a little more sort of like, even down to just being like, look, you decide what you want to do on this feature or this asset, or like trying at least, because it can be very easy for someone like me, quite gregarious, happy to talk a lot, to just kind of like tread on everyone else to the point where they don't contribute, and I have to sort of like rein it in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's echoed again, going back to previous guest and kind of saying similar things. We were talking about scope earlier, but this is also another thing I was speaking to. Really feel bad that I can't remember her name, but the producer of Manita's Kitchen. It was her first time being a producer, that role. She kind of just took it on, and being fully remote, the entire team. It's a large team for an indie game, and to the point where when they would kind of meet with publishers, they were like, "How many people are on your team? That doesn't make any sense." Like, but they were all contributing as it started from a game jam and a lot of students.
Yeah.
And they just all really got excited about it, and they all decided to work together on it. So it is a very large team, but at the very core of it's passion driven. Well, what she was saying is just like you just said, where you can't just yell across the room, "Hey, how are things going with this?" Like you don't have that instant feedback and being able to roll your chair over and take a look. So having those stand up meetings, that's very interesting that you do 2 of those a day. But it mimics more of what you would expect from a physical working environment, where you would have that more direct line of communication. I would assume that greatly helps in terms of especially from a producer's for the producer, having those stand-ups, just being able to kind of be on top of everything that's going on to an extent, but also just from a connection standpoint. If you're just working within Discord and then it just becomes a chat room where you don't have any of that those forms of communication happening, being able to see and speak to people greatly helps with that, obviously.
Yeah, every week the Friday stand up ends with, what are we all doing on the weekend, and we pass it around like a normal stand up, but it's about what we're doing on the weekend. End of every sprint, we do a big show and tell, so everyone's up to date on everything that everyone's doing. Every day, instead of going at here stand up, it's someone sends a gif of a game, and everyone has to, the first thing that we all do is try and guess it, and then whoever guesses it gives the gift the next day. It's just little things, little moments that sort of like, sand off the rougher edges and that sort of thing, and just kind of, sometimes nobody can guess the gif and it will just kill it dead, and you're like, oh well, that didn't work. And then the next time someone doesn't guess it, but someone's like, I swear it's this, and there's like a 10-minute rant, and it's just like, and that's all good, that's all gravy, that's all brilliant. And then one of the reasons we picked Discord as well was because it's really easy to, do webhooks and things like that. So build webhooks. So we have like our project management software, we use Hack and Plan, and that's got a hook. So there's like a leads channel where any change to any ticket gets posted. And then there's like a general channel where like, oh, this has been finished. And then that plugs into the QA team, who are like, okay, cool. I now know that these 3 things have been signed off and there's a build. And so I'll go and test them. And it's just sort of, again, that sort of, it can feel quite a lot because we have a lot of channels and you want to maybe mute some of them, but it's no more or less distracting than having someone chatting to a co-worker next to you while you're trying to do this really important piece of work. Right? So it's all sort of works out, I think.
Yeah, and I think that really this entire conversation, hearing all these different points and insights from you, there's a core theme here, and it's always opportunity. So it sounds like you're finding opportunity in everything. So working remote, you have obvious drawbacks, but you found the opportunity within the environment to turn them into positives and get positives out of it. similar to your networking style and how you're utilizing, you know, every minute that you have at expos and so on to kind of, you know, find those opportunities and meet key individuals like you've met kind of in passing, lightly, but actually turning that into a long term, you know, or you know, kind of long term value there. Always
Mm.
trying to find that opportunity, and I think that just in and of itself, is something to think about for any developer that's listening, or anyone really, in general, just trying to find those moments of opportunity throughout the day and not leaving, you know, kind of minutes, uh, you know, not well spent in a way, especially when you're at these, you know, kind of events, the whether it's an expo or whatever event for whatever industry you're working or contributing in. Um, you know, those are obvious opportunities because you have those focused minutes, throughout the day. But just in general, outside of that, always looking for opportunities within your profession, to turn everything into a positive. So that's all great stuff. Um, and you know, it is kind of showing itself. I mean, when you look on paper with your track record and your history, you can see there's something good going on here. Something's really clicking here. Being in the industry, as long as you've been, and running a studio and keeping it, afloat for that long is insane. Um, as an indie, like that's a huge accomplishment. You know, I see it every year. I've been in the industry now for a little over 8 years, working primarily with indies, so I see it, constantly. You know, studios going under. You know, layoffs. Obviously, this year has been kind of crazy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not even just from the game development side, even from the media side. You see it every day. You know, media outlets will go under, or there's high turnover. Um, so all encompassing within the video game industry, having stability, is an achievement, a significant achievement in and of itself. And I think that core of where you've been coming from with opportunity is really done well, in terms of longevity and stability to an extent with that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's crazy. And like, don't get me wrong. You know, we've staffed up and staffed down. You know, over the
Sure.
years, and you know, we've been affected by the downturn. Not as much as everyone, but like, you know, we haven't gone unscathed. You know, we had to tighten our belt and make some difficult decisions and things. But yeah, it's having your eyes open. And so I think it's interesting because like we really approached Trash Goblin as like arriving again, right? Like it's not like we ever arrived, you know. Like I sort of joke with the dev that a lot of people in the industry are like, oh, I think I've heard of you. What have you done? And they were like, oh, nothing you've heard of, like almost certainly, you know, because we haven't had the big hit, and most people don't. I'm not complaining about that, right? Like it's just most games don't succeed. Um, but we've hung on in, and I think our level of experience and our ability to deliver is somewhat like harder to spot from our track record of games. But when you look at how we run our studio and the people we've got, and I think, well, Sales Swords before, and hopefully we'll get to come back to that project one day. But Trash Goblin, I think, is really showing what we can do. You know, like unimpinged, unfettered, just like, and I will take some credit because at some point we didn't have the staff we have now, and now we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, but it's the team. It's all the team. You know, and I sort of joke. I run a lot as a producer. I do a lot of work as sort of creative and design director. But like since we've been like running at this Kickstarter and running the Kickstarter, I can't remember the last time I did something in Unity. Like genuinely, I think it's been like 3 months. It's all the team, and I just get to be a fan. I just get to just like when people like yourself are like, oh, I mean, like the art's really amazing, like this, that, and the other's hitting well. The characters, the
Mm-hmm.
design, like it's Steve, our designer, it's Kat, our principal artist, it's Talia and Donnie, the other two artists as well, and it's Ben, the audio designer. It's everybody, like Anthony, our QA, like it's incredible. Fee, our programmer, and everyone that's come and worked on it and has gone and hopefully will come back, and I just get to be a fan. That's kind of the dream almost. Like I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
like it's barely mine anymore. Like this project, like I help steer and guide and make decisions, right? But they're the ones doing all this work that's like people are responding so well to, and I just kind of get to join in. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's outstanding, and I think going back to Trash Goblin and the team specifically, the longevity has led the at bats, and the longevity has led to a moment, at least from my perspective, playing the demo, where you can see there's a it's hard to put into words, but it meshes, it comes together. You'll have games that they'll execute and they'll become into existence, but there's that thing vibe. There's that vibe. It doesn't work. It can be a mishmash of genres and mechanics, and technically it can all be there, and technically it can all be adequate or better. But just something about it when it comes together doesn't feel right. It kind of feels like it's just kind of glued together, and it's not its own thing in isolation. But with this demo, in the presentation, outside of the demo, but just the presentation as well, it's all coming together. And I think that's not something that is easy to replicate quickly. I think that's something that over time, as you build a team and as you work together and you kind of form those relationships, then it starts to come together to be that unique feeling, kind of gut feeling, lizard brain influenced feeling, when it all comes together. Another studio I can give a quick shout out to that does this is Funktronic Labs. Small indie studio, but they've been around for a long time. They've been, working on many games, more tech focused, so a lot of VR, AR, mixed reality, and so on. But the games they put together, they've had that team they've had time to really have that team kind of get into their groove together, to where the products that come out, they feel complete. The vibe is kind of it works. It's not a glued together product with each individual part that works. It all works as one. And I think again with this demo, what was the most impressive thing for me, because you could nitpick each individual aspect of it, just like you can nitpick anything. But this is a very early demo, and you can find areas in isolation that you think are, they could be something else. But when you take a step back and you look at it as a whole, very impressive, like significantly impressive. And you can clearly see where things can go. And I think that's what's leading to really good feedback that you're getting of, like me, I was earlier kind of gushing a bit in all these trying to push relationship building just because I feel like, it should be there. But obviously you can do, there are so many other things you can do, but that comes from kind of that in isolation, everything working together really well as one, going back to you putting together this team and everyone working together really well in fitting to create this unique experience that feels right in a way. Or in
I
so
appreciate
many
you
ways.
saying that. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always a team effort, right? And that's so for me. I'm always like bowled over when a team comes, like their debut game is like that put together, right? That's what really that I'm always like it's not a miracle because there's no such thing as luck. That's my other piece of business advice. There's no such thing as luck. But like oh crikey, I've completely blanked. The team that make Hades, Supergiant.
Yep. 100%.
I just like from what was it? So they did it was Hades, and before that it was
there were two or three games you could
game.
Take steps back. Yeah,
Bastion was the first one.
Bastion was the first. Yep.
Even that for the time was like holy crap,
Yep.
Like, and it's just like this team that's kind of sure they've worked together at other companies and in various roles, but they've come together and they've done that. And I'm like, holy crap, absolutely incredible. Yeah.
Like the way that I can kind of put into words what I'm getting at is like when the iPhone first came out, there were other touchscreen phones technically. Like I had a Samsung Instinct is what it's called. Yes, technically it's a touchscreen phone. But when you hold an iPhone next to it, technically it's a touchscreen phone. One of them is quite a bit better, and that gut feeling of it is this thing works together really well. Um, where
Yeah.
technically, if you had just a sheet of specs and features, this could check all the boxes, but it just doesn't feel right. And that's where, so from a video game perspective, Bastion, Hades, those games, it's that gut feeling, whatever it is, you could say vibe, whatever it artistically or visually, the writing, the sound, everything about it just comes together to create this unique package that
Mm.
gives you, that feeling of it. And I think that that's where Trash Goblin's going. It's got that feeling of like there's something there, and the team, like the artist and everyone working, like they've got a good idea. You can tell they've got a good idea of what's going on here. And like when you were talking about expanding out and people asking about lizards and are there other lizards, and so that comes from that core being so darn good. And that's when you can have fun with it. You can have fun with the writing of it. What's the
Mm.
vernacular of the lizards? Is it going to be different than other species? And you can really start to expand, but at the very core of it, you've already got a core down. And the
Yeah.
cool thing from what you've kind of talked about is a lot of the influences just come along the way. It's all just been a part of the journey to get to this point and expand on it. So I think all of that, all encompassing, is creating something really unique and special.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, so anyone that's listening and watching, go play the demo. One, go play Trash Goblin
Please.
on Steam, free demo. Go enjoy that. Um, Also, if you have the same feelings of, man, I wish they this was a part of it, or this would be cool, say it. Give the feedback. Feedback is
Please do.
outstanding, even if you don't have the money to back, to pledge on Kickstarter. Which obviously, if you do, that's great. But if you don't, feedback is always incredibly valuable to any studio, any point of production of a video game.
Oh, absolutely. We love it. We love feedback. We love getting our games into the hands of players, and you just can't argue with it. You can't argue with it. They might be saying something that you think is wrong, but what they're trying to say is
Yeah,
always right.
at
You
the
know?
core of it, yeah, at the core of it, there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the most part, every once in a while, you'll get like a Steam review that's like, "What was that?" Like, are you even talking about the game? Like, are you talking about the game that you played? Like, but when it comes to like in a forum or in a Discord, or those are
Yeah.
it's always good stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. So something that we didn't think we were going to do, but which we will have done by the time you're listening to this, is update the demo. We thought we were just going to be like, right, we're just hands off the demo, take a break. It's an opportunity to sort of step back from the game, enjoy the reception, think about other things, and then come back really fresh and excited. And then we were like, wait, we can do a load of really cool stuff, and we're all really excited about it. And some of the feedback, it's like, I could fix that in like 10, 15 minutes. Not me. We've already discussed how little I touch Unity. But the team were just like, let's do this. Let's do it. So it's like, all right, let's do it. So we have released a Christmas themed update basically for the game. So we've made it snow in Silver City. We've got decorations, all kinds of bits and bobs. I'll let people play it and find all the little Easter eggs and things. Well, Christmas presents, I suppose. But we've also added a couple of quality of life things, fixed a few bugs that people have been raising, and that's something that basically we were just like, well, okay, we can, so we should. And admittedly, marketing, it's another bite at the apple, right? Hey, streamers,
sure.
you all like this. We've updated. Go and have a rummage.
Yeah.
Hey, people who haven't covered it yet, we've just updated it with all this extra stuff. Go and have a rummage, etc. But basically, we saw like a really good response to even just the way that we were interacting in text, on the Steam forums, on the Kickstarter, in our Discord, etc. People just responding really well to us responding, and we're like, okay, so fingers crossed. Just you wait, to where we've gone. Hey, yo, user 4583 beta 1992. That thing you said, we put it in because it's a really
Yeah.
good shout, and I can't believe we didn't do it. Right, like I'm not
That's
saying
great.
we've like completely rewritten the game and added tons of
Sure.
features, but there's like a couple of things that were like, yeah, that should go in.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so really going to be excited to see what people think about that.
that's great. That's so that, going back to one of the Kickstarters that I worked on, we did a similar thing where in the middle, so I was actually brought on to the Kickstarter in the middle of it. So it was just
Oh
like,
wow!
oh my God, all right, what's going on? So getting up to speed and then figuring out, all right, let's work out some things here. And one of the
That's
things
tough. That's
we
tough.
is very tough. Um, there were a couple things we did. One of them didn't work, which I guess I'll start with that one. It was around Valentine's Day, and so we did a Match.com style dating website for the afterlife, and is for the game Evergate. And so in that one you play as a spirit that's kind of passed on. And so we had this. They even did. They're from MIT. The team they all had met at MIT, and so they had a buddy who had he was really good with he was in film, I guess, and so he was able to over a weekend they were able to go out and film on campus, kind of like a Match.com commercial, with the main character as a plushie, um, but as a meeting, their kind of connection in the afterlife. The tagline was not just for life, but afterlife, and so we did a whole commercial for it, a trailer, and then a website where you could put in kind of this Match.com style questions. You answer them, and then it gives you a random, kind of match. And so we did that. That didn't work, which was kind of a bummer. But that was more of a kind of hoping to go viral type of thing, where you're kind of throwing spaghetti against the wall, hoping. But the other thing that did work was updating the demo and creating a separate build that was a speedrunner challenge. And so we had a separate build, and in the bottom corner, when you got your results, there was a random uh, key string to validate your time. And then we had in the Discord server various roles that you would earn if you were, a champion, or if you had met, certain thresholds completing the game in various times. And then there were also goals or incentives rather. So future DLC, again, special roles you could win in the Discord server. And the reason why that was created was because a segment of the players for that particular game is a very speedrun friendly game. It was going to appeal to them. So we created a separate build that targeted that type of gamer, and created a social challenge, community challenge as well. And that led to a lot of social content from speedrunners that would run it. And then also reposting their times on social media, so posting on Twitter and Facebook, and just creating that content for us, which was really cool. But updating a demo, always a great move. And I love that you mentioned in the notes calling out people that contributed to the specific updates that are in there. That's always awesome too, because that feels good as someone in the community. If you threw an idea out, or you notified of a bug and it got resolved, and they cited you for it, you feel awesome, and that builds that stronger bond with the team, and that can create some within the community champions of a game in the community,
Yeah.
and eventually maybe lead to a moderator or two, maybe. But that's always awesome that you're able to do that, and that your team was passionate enough, and that speaks back to what you had mentioned earlier, like having fun with this, where they're like, hey, I think we can do these. If they weren't having fun, they wouldn't have done that. They wouldn't have been proactive in that way. So that speaks to that, and that's also something that you want to see from a developer, is if they're kind of going out of their way to do things that they don't have to do. They didn't have to do that. That's really really cool to see. So that's awesome stuff.
Yeah, hopefully people will respond to it well, and we've you made me think of a marketing misstep we had many years ago when we were working on Trash Goblin Tango Fiesta. It seems like a good idea, right? I was like, I know what I'll do. We'll make like a playable press release for the game, right? How do we
Oh
make a
wow.
press release stand out, right? Like we'll make like it into just a quick little game. Cause scope creep, blah 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 blah. End up
Yep.
making what you can still. I think you can still get it on Steam. It's free. I think it's free. The Legend of Tango, right? Because the whole game was born at a game jam live at EGX back in the day. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it was sort of like a JRPG, a comedy JRPG retelling of how the team came together and how the project was born, and then it's supposed to be really interesting and exciting. Kind of like, oh, that's really cool. And I just made that like on my marketing time, right?
Yeah.
Like on my own in RPG Maker. And of course, then I have to obviously, if people haven't got time to write about a game they haven't got time to write about, they're not going to write about the game about the game
Yeah.
that they haven't got. Do you know what
That
I mean?
is
It's
still
just
really
the same
cool.
problem.
Yeah. But I love the creativity behind it. And that I can give you another marketing flop that I did in the past from that. So I was working with a VR game, and we did a prequel to the game
Hmm.
that would lead to DLC. And the prequel, well, so it ended up being, it was going to be a part of a marketing beat. And so the idea was, how there are various crazy puzzles that like communities will come together and they're like, they'll find one answer and then that leads to that, but then you'll have communities trying to like solve it, Um, so we put together something like that, and we used a subreddit that was specifically for those puzzles. There's a subreddit. I forget, it was many years ago, but I forget the name of these types of puzzles and what they're called. But there was a subreddit dedicated to it. And so I created this landing page where it's very cryptic, very short cryptic. And then you put an answer, and then it leads to a thing, and then another thing, and then eventually it leads to more story bits. And if you went through the whole kind of loop of it, it was literally the prequel to the game, which was cool. And it would give you this free DLC, cosmetic DLC that ties in with the story and everything about the prequel. But it was a marketing campaign that literally was the prequel to the game that didn't exist prior to us working together. And it's very naive of me to think that, oh, I'll be able to put together an elaborate, cryptic, campaign that'll take forever for a community. They found out in like 10 minutes. It took them like maybe less. Like it was no time at all. They found it. They looked through it was source. They just did inspect element, looked through the source code, and they're like, oh, all right, here's the answer to this. What's this? It took them a few minutes. It was done.
Brutal.
And it was like
Brutal.
all that time put into it, killed in like a couple of minutes. And it was just like, it was a blip. And it was like, oh my God. I thought it was such a cool, elaborate thing to do. But yeah, that was a major, those kind of campaigns. And that's why, again, over the last handful of years, I've really changed over, because initially, going back 8 years, I was working with studios that were working on rough games. You're starting out as a service provider, so you're working with those that need the service, but maybe their budgets aren't very large, or so it's just a natural way of going about it. You're not going to work with Iron Galaxy right out of the gate. You're going to eventually get to that point. So early on, I'm working with individual solo developers or really small scale things, and so at that time, I had to get really creative to kind of fight for them, to advocate for them, to earn some attention. And that's where these guerrilla marketing campaigns were coming from early on. And they worked, like a handful of them worked early on really well. It's so much so that a few of my campaigns were getting included in talks at GDC. And I was starting to get known for being the guerrilla marketing guy early on, which I hated because everyone wanted it, but it's not sustainable. Like, even if it hits, it's not sustainable unless you've got a full marketing campaign going, because it's just a blip. You may get a ton of coverage from media, but they have advertising revenue they need. So that requires a lot of content to be produced to get eyeballs at all times of the day. And so your
Yeah.
story may get picked up and it'll be, a blip for 30 minutes before it gets buried for the next story and the next story and next review and preview and so on. And so unless it resonates and you have a call to action, you're not even going to convert. You're just going to have visibility with no conversions. And again, if you don't have a full campaign, where your PR timeline's mapped out, you have content creators in the loop, and you have everything kind of organized, and you build up that momentum over time. If you don't do that, and you're only shooting for the moon with a guerrilla marketing campaign, you're going to have an isolated moment that just falls flat and doesn't get you what you want. But as of late, that's what's kind of over the last 5 years. I've switched more towards social media because that's completely within everyone's control. No matter if you're a solo developer or a large AAA team, you can hammer at a door, so to speak, and force your way in to get that attention at all times throughout the day by just posting social media content on all social media channels. And it took me a while to embrace that because, like, I don't use social media personally very often. I need to, but I don't. And there are certain social channels I just don't like to use, like Facebook. I'm not a Facebook person. But from a marketing standpoint, that doesn't matter because players for the games that I'm representing, they're on all of them. They're on every channel. And so I have to be there. It doesn't matter. And I have to be there consistently. And I have to understand the best ways to resonate on each individual channel and so on. But it's something I've embraced because I've had guerrilla marketing campaigns in the past that I thought were awesome. And for whatever reason, they failed. But that took up so much time and resources from everyone. And then when they failed, there's no backup plan. So then you're just sitting there, twisting your thumbs, when it was like, we put 3 months into this and nothing came out of it. And now the budget's been spent, no results, everyone's bummed. That's not a good time. So but again, with social media, you can brute force it, and that's 100% within your control. And you don't even have to focus on quality, just quantity, and that'll eventually lead to better quality as you start to see engagement change over time. And you'll have a post out of nowhere, you'll have a YouTube short that gets 25,000 views, and you're like, what just happened? All my other ones were getting like 100 or 150, and this one got. So what did I do on this one? And then that gradually get better and better and better. And so I think that speaks to not just those that are listening that are thinking about doing a Kickstarter, but just any developer of any size. You can be a solo developer working on a really small scale game. It doesn't matter if you can easily brute force it to get the attention that you need. And I mean, you've seen it being in the industry as long as you have, back when we had Steam Greenlight and kind of going from there, the barrier to entry on all these platforms, specifically speaking of Steam, the most popular distribution platform in the world for PC games, like games are releasing on that at a higher volume than ever before. It's $100 and you can get on the platform now. And so you've got all this competition. Everyone's competing against each other for attention, and you have these avenues to secure attention with media and with content creators and with events and with festivals, which I'm a big fan of now with all these digital festivals popping up post E3. You have all these digital festivals, which are great. But outside of those opportunities and outside of media and so on, you can have social media where you can still secure that attention. And a lot of other developers that you may be competing against for attention, they may only use, say Twitter or X. They may only use that and post on that once a day or once every other day. They may use LinkedIn, or they may, just use Instagram. Very few are actually using all of them and posting multiple times a day, every single day. So that's an opportunity for everyone that's listening to kind of get that attention that you need. Total side rant.
Yeah,
I don't know. I keep getting on that
No.
rant. I don't know why. I just need to present a GDC talk on it because there's so much more I want to talk about with it because I just see so much value there. It's no cost. It's just time.
Like the audience is so big now that
yes,
there's a niche for everything, a valid niche, right? Like 100%. A niche that you can make a business around. You can find an audience for what you're making. Like, you just have to look. It's
I totally agree. And with Trash Goblin, like, that's a very unique game. It's got unique elements to it that in isolation a puzzle game is a puzzle game. There are a lot of puzzle games, or having the simulator style of things. There are simulator games, but when you put it all together, it's a unique. Like that's something that's in niche in a way, but there's going to be an audience for it, and it works, and it's something that's very exciting. So I think that speaks, really well to what you just said. Like every style, every small, kind of segment that you feel like you'll appeal to, it's going to exist. It's going to be there. So now you just need to get their attention. You just need to get in front of them somehow. But yeah.